Picture the most expensive room you have ever stood in. Now fill it with women who are not permitted to say a single thing they actually mean. Add candles that burn away a workman's daily wage every hour, a locked box of tea leaves guarded more carefully than the silver, and a 16-year-old girl standing against the silk-papered wall with a loaded tray, whose arms have been trembling for 20 minutes, and who, as far as anyone seated in that room is concerned, does not exist. That's a Mayfair drawing room in the winter of 1814, the politest battlefield in Europe. A place where a fortune could change hands over a card table before midnight, and a girl's entire future could be decided by the angle of one raised eyebrow. A place where you could scrub frozen ash out of a grate on your knees in the dark of the morning, and stand 3 feet from a countess plotting like a field marshal by evening. We're going back there tonight, not as guests. Guests only ever see the performance. We're going in with the tray. 1 year, 1 girl, everything she would have seen, smelled, heard and survived. And everything the ladies of that house actually did in the hour after dinner, when the dining room door clicked shut behind them and the men were left alone with the port. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no clue whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who like hearing about locked tea caddies and secret account books at 2 a.m. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable, here we go. Your eyes open to darkness. For a moment, maybe half a second, you have forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. It's not just one smell, it's layers. Cold coal ash, first, because it lives in your hair and under your fingernails and no amount of washing gets it out. Then tallow, the mutton fat stink of the cheap candle stub on the chair beside the bed. The kind of candle they give servants. The kind that gutters and smokes and smells like a Sunday roast gone wrong. Under that, damp plaster and frost, because the water in the wash basin has frozen again, and there is ice on the inside of the window glass, in patterns like ferns. Then the chamber pot behind the screen in the corner, and underneath it all, the warm, sour animal smell of 2 people who work 16-hour days sleeping in one narrow bed under every piece of wool they own, including you. Welcome to London. February 1814. The coldest winter anyone in this house can remember. In the coldest stretch of winters anyone in this country can remember. The Thames itself has frozen solid between the bridges. People are roasting oxen on the ice. You'll get to that. You're lying on a straw mattress in an attic room at the very top of the Earl of Marchwood's house on Curzon Street, Mayfair. 4 stories of Portland stone and polished mahogany below you, and then this. Bare boards, a sloped ceiling you can touch without straightening your arm, 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 basin, 1 screen. The body pressed against your back, snoring gently, is Kitty. You share the bed. That's normal. Every housemaid in London shares a bed. Privacy is a luxury nobody at your level can afford. At least Kitty doesn't steal the blankets much. Your name is Anne Hartley. You're 16 years old, and you arrived here 4 months ago in October of 1813 from the village of Aldbury in Hertfordshire with exactly 1 deal box, 1 spare shift, and your mother's needle case. The needle case is your 1 bit of treasure. A roll of red flannel tied with a bootlace, holding 7 good steel needles, a bodkin, and a paper of pins. Your mother pressed it into your hands on the carrier's cart and said, "A girl who can sew a fine seam will never be wholly at anyone's mercy." You keep it under your side of the mattress, and you check it is still there every night before you sleep, the way a miser checks his gold. Remember it matters later. Back home, everyone said London would swallow you whole. They weren't wrong. The church bells are already ringing. Not just one church. Dozens, rolling in over the rooftops from every direction. But the closest is St. George's, Hanover Square, 3 streets away. The church where the fashionable get married, where heiresses are handed across like bills of exchange. It's been standing since 1725, and its bell owns your mornings now, 6 o'clock. In summer it will be 5. You need to get up. Mrs. Bell will have your hide if the drawing-room grate isn't blacked and the fire laid before 7. And Mrs. Bell has never once in her life been wrong about the time. The floorboards are so cold under your bare feet that they burn. You break the skin of ice on the basin with your knuckle. You've learned to do it with the knuckle, not the fingertips, because your fingertips are already cracked at the corners from cold water and blacklead and lye, and the cracks open and sting if you knock them. The water underneath is so cold it makes the bones of your hands ache. You wash your face and neck. That's the whole wash. A proper wash happens once a week, in the scullery, in water you carry and heat yourself. Kitty surfaces from the blankets with her dark hair stuck flat to one cheek and a crease from the bolster running down her face like a scar. Frost again, she says. Ferns on the glass. Lord. She says it like a whole prayer. Kitty Marlowe is 19, Southwark born, 3 years in this house, and she knows everything. Which stair creaks, which tradesmen cheat, which footman is worth smiling at, and exactly how long you can warm your hands at the kitchen range before the cook notices. She is the nearest thing you have to a friend in the entire city of London, and you have known her 16 weeks. You dress in the dark by feel. Wool stockings darned at both heels, stays laced by guess, a grey stuff gown, and over it the coarse morning apron, the sacking one because the morning's work is filthy. The white apron, the good one, stays on its nail until the afternoon. That white apron is the closest thing you have to a uniform of rank. It says upper servant in training. It says fit to be seen. Whether you are ever actually seen is a different question, and the answer is meant to be no. Appearances matter in this city. They matter more than almost anything, and they matter most of all in a house whose entire business is appearing. Down the back stairs, then. And when I say back stairs, I need you to understand what that means in a Mayfair townhouse in 1814. This is not a house with one staircase that everybody politely shares. This is 2 houses, threaded through each other, touching everywhere and meeting nowhere. There is the family's house, the wide stone stair, the marble hall, the drawing room, silk and light and space. And there is your house, wrapped around it like the workings inside a clock case, a corkscrew of bare wooden treads, steep as a ladder, dark as a chimney, running from the attics to the basement kitchen. You will go up and down it perhaps 30 times today. The family will never set foot on it. Most of them could not tell you where the door to it is, and that door is covered in green baize precisely so that it looks like part of the wall. The house works because you are invisible. That is not a figure of speech. It is the actual operating principle. The first thing Mrs. Bell taught you, your first morning, holding a candle up between your faces so you could see she meant it. Nothing in this house happens by magic, she said. Fires do not light themselves. Water does not carry itself. But upstairs it must look like magic. You will see everything, girl. Everything. And you will be seen by no one. Carry it in. Carry it out. Say nothing. You thought, that first morning, that she was describing your servitude. It took you almost a year to understand she was describing your power. But we'll get to that too. The kitchen at 6:30 is the only warm place in the world. The range has been banked all night, and the cook is already shouting quietly at the kitchen maid about the state of the copper pans. You collect your housemaid's box, brushes, black lead, tinder box, emery paper, leathers, and it drags your shoulder down like a bucket of wet sand. Then up the back stairs again, 3 flights into the still, freezing dark of the drawing room where yesterday's fire is a heap of dead grey ash, and the real work of the day begins on your knees. Because the drawing room must be perfect by the time her ladyship enters it. Not clean, perfect. And it must be perfect with no evidence that any human hands made it so. You will spend more of your life in this room than any other person in the household, family included. And in the entire year we're about to live through, not one guest will ever see you working in it. Keep that thought. It's the whole story. The drawing room of Marchwood House is on the first floor at the front, and it is 30 feet long, 22 feet wide and 14 feet high, and you know this because you have crawled over every inch of it with a brush in your hand. 3 tall windows look down onto Curzon Street, each one shuttered now, each shutter folded into its own box in the wall like a secret. The walls are hung with a pale green silk that cost, according to Kitty, who had it from the butler, who had it from the upholsterer's man, more than £400. Your wages are £8 a year. You have done that arithmetic on your knees many times. The walls of this one room are worth 50 years of you. First, the grate. You spread an old drugget cloth so that not one speck of ash touches the carpet, and you rake out the dead fire, sieving the cinders because cinders can be burned again downstairs, and her ladyship's household wastes nothing. Remember that. It is not meanness, it is doctrine, and it comes from the top. Then the black lead. You brush the paste onto the cold iron, let it dull, and buff it until the whole grate gleams like a beetle's back. Your hands are black to the wrist. There is a smell to black lead, graphite and grease that you will associate with 6 o'clock in the morning for the rest of your life. Then the fire itself, paper, kindling cross-hatched, coals built into a small architecture that will catch with one spark and burn evenly for hours. Coal is delivered down the coal hole in the pavement, and it costs around 50 shillings a cauldron this winter, and this house burns a cauldron in under a fortnight when the family's in town, and you know that because you hear the accounts being reckoned. You hear everything being reckoned. That too comes later. Then the room. Tea leaves. Used, damp, saved from yesterday. Scattered over the carpet to hold the dust, then swept up again with the long brush, working backward toward the door so you leave no footprints in the pile, the way a good housebreaker works, which is a comparison Kitty made once and which you have never been able to unthink. Every candle stub collected from the sconces and the chandelier, because candle ends are a perquisite, they belong by ancient servants' law to the butler who sells them, and nothing in this house simply vanishes. Everything is counted, weighed, saved, sold, or locked. Which brings us to the caddy. On the little rosewood table beside her ladyship's chair sits a box about the size of a large Bible. Rosewood, brass corners, and a brass keyhole. It is a tea caddy, and inside it are 2 lidded compartments, one for black tea and one for green, and a mixing bowl of cut glass between them. The black tea is Bohea and the good Congu. The green is fine Hyson, and the Hyson cost 12 shillings a pound. Say it slowly. 12 shillings a pound. You earn about 3 shillings a week. The little box on the rosewood table holds, when full, more than a month of you. And that is why it is locked, and why the key does not live with the butler, or with Mrs. Bell and the great ring of keys at her waist. The key to the tea caddy lives on a ribbon in her ladyship's own pocket. Where a woman's real treasure is, there her key will be also. In 4 months you have never once seen that caddy open. You have only dusted the outside carefully, daily, the way a verger dusts an altar. Mark the caddy. Like the needle case, it matters later. By 7 the drawing room is done and looks untouched, which is the point. By 8 you've done the morning room and the dining room and the hall, hauled 2 scuttles of coal up 3 flights, and eaten breakfast standing in the kitchen. Bread, dripping, and small beer, with your back against the warm wall of the chimney, which is the best thing that will happen to your body all day. Mrs. Bell inspects the rooms at 8. She is from Norfolk. She is somewhere past 50. She's been in service 34 years, and she moves through a room like a magistrate. She wears at her waist a chatelaine of keys: storeroom, still room, linen press, china closet, sugar chest. And when she walks, the whole house can hear justice coming. Her hands are the cleanest hands you've ever seen on a working woman, and she's proud of that in the way other women are proud of their children. This morning she stops at the drawing-room door, looks and says, "The hearth." You look. There is a crumb of cinder, 1 crumb on the white marble of the hearth slab. "Yes, Mrs. Bell." You cross the room and take it up with your apron. She watches. She says nothing else. From Mrs. Bell, nothing else is a wage. "Her ladyship has Lady Verney on Tuesday," she says, turning away, "and there are 11 to dinner Thursday. You'll be wanted upstairs both evenings. Wash your hands to the elbow before you touch the white apron." And that, flat, thrown over a departing shoulder, is how you learn you are being brought into the drawing-room in the evenings. Kitty translates it for you later, in the scullery. Whispering over the knives, it means you carry in, you take out, you stand by the wall. It means Mrs. Bell thinks your face is quiet enough, and your hands are careful enough to be furniture in front of quality. It is a promotion of a kind, and it comes with no money at all. Stand still, look at nothing, hear nothing, Kitty says, scouring a knife along the board. And mind, hear nothing means hear everything, and keep it in your own head. There's maids been turned off without a character for repeating what they heard upstairs. Turned off same day. No character means no place. No place means the street, you understand? Yes. No, you don't. But you will. She flips the knife, checks her face in the blade, pulls a grin at herself. Kitty can make you laugh in a scullery at 9 in the morning with your arms in grey water. That is a rarer talent than playing the harp. But first, before any of it, comes the errand that shows you what kind of winter this is. That same week the cook wants fish, and the fishmonger's boy has not come, because half the boys in London are down at the river, because the river has stopped. So Mrs. Bell, who does not waste anything, least of all a pair of young legs, sends you and Kitty to Shepherd Market for the fish, and tells you, in the same breath, and with a face like a door closing, that if your route home happened to pass by the Thames, she supposed she could not know everything. It is the only kindness she will show you for a month, and it is enormous. You see it from the top of the stairs at Queen Hithe first, the Thames, the tide river, the busiest water in the world, lying dead. Between London Bridge and Blackfriars, the ice is locked from bank to bank, grey, white, filthy, magnificent, and there are hundreds of people walking on it. On it. There are tents down there. In a double row they're calling the City Road, with flags flying. There are swings. There are printing presses set up on the ice itself. hammering out souvenir cards that say printed on the frozen Thames February 1814, because a Londoner will sell a souvenir of the end of the world while the world is still ending. There is a whole sheep roasting over a fire built on planks, and they are selling slices of it as Lapland mutton at a shilling. A shilling! A slice, and men are paying it, grinning, because when will they ever again eat mutton cooked on top of the Thames? Kitty takes your arm at the top of the Waterman's stairs, and the two of you go down onto the river. The ice creaks, not once, constantly, a low grumbling underfoot like a house settling, and under your feet you can feel the cold coming up through your pattens, and somewhere under that, the river still alive and moving in the dark. The watermen, who cannot work their boats, have turned toll-keepers instead. They've cut channels along the banks, so you must use their gangplanks. Twopence to come aboard the ice, twopence to leave it. Trade finds a way. Trade always finds a way. Look at it, Kitty says. Her breath hangs in front of her face. She isn't laughing now. My gran told me about the frost fair in her day, and I called her a liar. You stand between the tents on the frozen river with your basket of fish against your hip, 16 years old, 4 months in London, and you think, nobody at home will believe a word of this. You're back on Curzon Street within 2 hours, and nobody says anything, and the fish is good, and that is the 4th of February 1814. The thaw comes within the week. The ice breaks up and takes barges and watermen's stairs with it, and by the middle of the month the river is a river again, as if it had never happened at all. You will think of the frost fair all year, not because it was strange, because of what Kitty said walking home, when you asked her why the watermen were smiling while their livelihood stood frozen solid. Because they can see it'll end, she said. It's the ones who can't see the end of a thing that stop smiling. Remember that when you're standing against the wall of an evening. You didn't understand her. Not then. Tuesday brings Lady Verney, and Lady Verney is an education all by herself. She's a widow of 62, out of Mount Street, 5 minutes' walk away, and she has buried 2 husbands, a fortune, and by her own account most of the interesting people of the last century. She comes to Marchwood House every Tuesday the family is in town, and has done for 20 years. She's announced at 3 o'clock. They call it a morning call, and it happens at 3 in the afternoon. And no, nobody thinks that's strange. Morning, in the language of this world, simply means before dinner, and the language of this world is a code you are learning one humiliation at a time. You carry up the cake and the Madeira on the good Sheffield tray, and that is when you first see the vinaigrette. It is a tiny box, smaller than a snuff box, silver gilt, hanging from Lady Verney's wrist on a short chain. The lid opens on a pierced inner grill, gold beneath, and under the grill sits a scrap of sponge soaked in aromatic vinegar. Sharp, medicinal, a smell that cuts through a warm room like a pin through silk. Ladies carry them against faintness, against bad smells, against the general assault of London. Lady Verney does not use hers against any of those things. Lady Verney uses hers as punctuation. She snaps the lid open when someone says something extraordinary, inhales once, snaps it shut. In a long afternoon of talk you can chart the really scandalous revelations by the clicking of that little gold grill, like a telegraph. Mark the vinaigrette. It has one great moment coming, months from now, on the worst night of the summer, and it will not be used for punctuation. What do the 2 women talk about? Her ladyship and her oldest ally, in a green silk room on a Tuesday, while you stand at the sideboard being furniture. They talk about everything that runs the world, is the honest answer, dressed in the vocabulary of nothing. In 1 hour, standing perfectly still with your hands folded, you hear, "Which baronet has mortgaged his Yorkshire estate twice over, and is therefore smiling so very hard at the Harringtons' plain eldest daughter and her £30,000. Which regiment is ordered abroad, had from a colonel's wife before the colonel's own brother knew it, which great lady has not been seen at chapel because of a French dancing master, which banking house in the city is whispered to be shaky, and whether the whisper was started by a rival, and who profits either way." Lady Verney carries more current intelligence in her head than a newspaper office. She updates it hourly, and she never writes any of it down. The men have their clubs in St. James's Street, and their coffee houses in the city. The ladies have the drawing rooms, and the drawing rooms, you will come to understand, are faster. "Information, my dear," you hear her tell her ladyship that first Tuesday, over the second glass of Madeira, "is the only currency they have left us. We may not sign, we may not sit in Parliament, we may not so much as sell a horse without a husband's name on the paper. So we deal in the one commodity that goes through keyholes, and we deal in it better than they deal in their stocks because we have been at it since Eden, and because they never suspect the size of the trade. Snap goes the vinaigrette. Click goes the grill. You stand at the sideboard with your eyes on the middle distance, 16 years old, memorizing every word. But Tuesday is only the rehearsal. Thursday is the performance. 11 to dinner, which with the family makes 14 at table, which in the arithmetic of below stairs means the whole machine at full steam, the good service, the best plate, 6 wax candles in the dining room alone, wax mind at £0.50 the pound, when the tallow you get downstairs is 8p, because guests can smell the difference, and the smell of tallow says poverty the way Blacklead says 6 in the morning. Dinner is at 7. This is fashionable London in 1814. Dinner has been sliding later for 50 years, from the honest 2 o'clock of your grandmother's day to this, candle-lit, absurd, magnificent. 2 full courses, each one a whole landscape of dishes set on the table at once. Soups, fish, a saddle of mutton, fowls, ragouts, jellies shivering in the candlelight. Then the cloth drawn, dessert and wine set out on the bare gleaming mahogany. You do not serve at table. That is Thomas's world. Thomas the first footman, 6'1" in powdered hair, hired like all first footmen partly by the inch, because a tall footman is a public advertisement, and everybody knows the going rate rises with the height. Your post is the landing and the drawing room. You are the last relay in the chain that runs from kitchen to table, and you wait, and you listen to the roar of 14 people being witty through 2 hours and 11 dishes. And then it happens. The thing the whole evening is built around, the thing so ordinary nobody at that table has thought about it in years. Her ladyship catches the eye of the principal lady guest, that's all. An eyebrow, a half-inch inclination of the head. And every woman at that table rises as one, as if by a signal agreed in a former life, and the men all stand and stay standing, and the ladies walk out of the dining room in strict order of rank, silk hissing against the door frame, and they cross the landing, and they enter the drawing room, and the door closes. Here is your etymology for the night, and it is the whole subject in a single word. Drawing room is not drawing as in pictures. It is withdrawing room, the room to which the ladies withdraw, worn smooth by 2 centuries of use, the way a stair tread wears. The room is named for this exact moment. The most important room in the English house is named for the moment the women leave the men. The men stay behind with the port. Everyone knows what the men do. The men are loud. You can hear them through 2 closed doors, a low tidal roar with breakers of laughter. Thomas, who stands at the dining room sideboard through all of it, gives the household the report downstairs at midnight, and the report is always the same. They drink. They drink prodigiously. 3 bottles a man is not thought remarkable in this decade, and there are gentlemen in this town with reputations built on 6. They talk politics and horses and money. They repeat the same 3 stories. They grow red. Someone sings, someone weeps about a woman, and at least one dips below the table's horizon and stays there. And in the sideboard by Thomas's hip there is a chamber pot, and it is there for the reason you think it is for, and it gets used, gentlemen not caring to interrupt the 4th bottle by leaving the room. That is the men's mystery. That is what the lords of creation do with their sacred hour. Nobody ever asks what the ladies do. The men never ask. The men never think to ask. It is ribbons they assume, and nerves and poetry and each other's gowns. You're inside the door with the tea tray. You're about to spend a year finding out. The first thing the ladies do when the door closes is nothing at all. There is a silence. 5 seconds, 10, while silk settles onto sofas, and it is a different silence from any in the public part of the evening. It is the silence of stays being metaphorically loosened, of a garrison standing down. Someone sighs, someone laughs, low at nothing. The room becomes, for the only hour of its day, an honest room. Then her ladyship takes the ribbon from her pocket and unlocks the tea caddy. 4 months you have dusted that box. This is the first time you've seen it open. Inside, the 2-lidded wells, the glass bowl, the dull green and black leaf, the caddy spoons shaped like a scallop shell, and her ladyship, a countess with a cook, a butler, and 11 servants under this roof, measures and blends and makes the tea herself, with her own hands at her own table, while the kettle you carried up mutters on its spirit lamp. No servant makes tea in this world. Making the tea is rank. Making the tea is power made visible. The whole room drinks what she blends, strong or weak, green or black, at her pleasure. 12 shillings a pound, spooned out by a woman who could buy the shop, precisely because she could buy the shop. And while she does it, the talk begins, the real talk. And the register of it is what shocks you the first time. It drops half an octave and all the lace comes off it. At the tea table, in the next 40 minutes, you hear the 11 to dinner ladies of Mayfair conduct, in order, a review of the money troubles of 3 absent families, precise to the guinea. The drafting by committee of a letter one of them will send to a solicitor in the morning. The arrangement of a marriage, not the romance of it, the architecture of it, which mother will call on which aunt, which ball will supply the accidental meeting, and a piece of medical counsel passed from a woman who has borne 8 children to a new young wife, spoken quietly by the fire, the kind of counsel no physician in London will give her, and no book she's permitted to read contains. The young wife holds her teacup very still, and listens as if her life depends on it, for the sufficient reason that it does. When the door closes, the real business of the house begins. You will see it 100 times this year. It is never once ribbons. It is close to 1 in the morning before that Thursday ends. The guests are gone. The street door is barred. Thomas has carried the last of the plate down to the butler's pantry to be counted and locked. Every fork counted every night, because a single tablespoon of this service would sell for more than your quarter's wages, and everyone in the house knows exactly which side of that temptation they live on. You go up to the drawing-room one last time to smore the fire and gather the cups, and her ladyship is still there. She has sent her own maid to bed. She sits at the little French writing table between the windows with a single fresh candle, and she has a book open in front of her. Not a printed book, a ledger, red morocco cover, small enough to lie hidden under a hand, its pages ruled in her own strong ink lines. Beside it, a heap of tradesmen's bills on their spike, and a short column of coins arranged by size, the way a banker's clerk arranges them. You freeze in the doorway with your tray, and she says without looking up, "Come, do your work. You're no interruption." Which means you are furniture, and she believes it. So you cross the room soft-footed and kneel at the grate, and behind you, in the deep silence of 1 o'clock, you hear the sounds you will come to know better than any music. The flick of turned pages, the tick of a nib dipped and wiped, the small definite click of coin counted onto mahogany. And once, you would swear to it, a very quiet, very unladylike word breathed at the paper. It takes you until summer to piece together, from Kitty, from Thomas, from your own eyes and ears at the wall, what that red book is. Here is what it is. His lordship is a member of White's, the oldest and grandest club in St. James's Street, and at White's and at Watier's, which is worse, his lordship plays deep. Everyone's lord plays deep. This is the great age of it. There are men in this town who have lost whole counties at hazard, and the betting book at White's carries wagers on everything, from Bonaparte's next move, to which raindrop will reach the bottom of the window first. His lordship is not the worst of them by half. But he signs what he loses, and what he signs must be paid, because a gentleman's gaming debts are debts of honour, and must be settled before the butcher, before the coal merchant, before your wages, precisely because no law can compel them. Honour, you will learn, is the word men use for the debts they choose to pay, and her ladyship keeps the ledger, the real one, the one that knows what the household costs to the shilling, the children's of coal, the wax and the tallow, the 14-shilling difference between what the fishmonger charges this house and what he charges an honest one, the servants' wages, the interest quietly owed to quietly patient men. She audits the steward's accounts and finds what he has smoothed over. She knows, weeks before his lordship troubles to, when the quarter will come up short. And when it does, she moves money the only ways a married woman in 1814 legally can, for she can own nothing, sign nothing, borrow nothing in her own name. The law calls her covered by her husband, as if she were a chair under a dust-sheet. She has her pin money, settled on her by her marriage articles 30 years ago. She has her small economies, candle ends and saved cinders, doctrine from the top, now you know why, and she has the whist table, because her ladyship, you will discover, plays cards like a surgeon operates, shilling points, half-crown points among her own set, pound points once, that you saw. She counts every card out and every card home. She reads faces the way Kitty reads tradesmen. She never drinks past the first glass, and she plays against men 3 bottles deep who believe, as an article of faith, that women play for amusement. Across a season, those evenings put real money into the red book. It goes out again on the spike, to the coal merchant, to the chandler. The men sign, the women reckon. You could put that sentence over the door of every great house in Mayfair, and not one man walking under it would understand what it meant. Mark the red ledger. Kneeling girl at the grate. Of the 5 things this year will show you, it is the one you will think about for the rest of your life. Lady Georgiana you know by now, of course, in the way you know the weather. She's 19, the last child left at home, and she is in her 2nd season, which is a sentence with teeth in it. A first season is hope, A second season is scrutiny. Her hair is her mother's, dark, and takes an hour, and it is Kitty who dresses it, because a house that keeps a strict lady's maid for the Countess makes do below that, and Kitty's fingers are quick, and her tongue is safe. From the servant's side of the wall, Lady Georgiana is judged kind. She says thank you. She does not throw things, and once, when you dropped a full scuttle on the stair and sat down in the coals with the shock of it, she came out of the morning room, looked, and went away, and no one was told, and nothing was said. Below stairs, that is the whole catechism of a good employer. She went away, and nothing was said. It is her sitting room, the little back room on the second floor that teaches you her secret. One bright cold morning in early spring, and it teaches you because you dust. On her shelf, between a prayer book and an atlas, stand several volumes bound in sober brown calf, and the spine of one says, in modest gold, Sermons to Young Women. You have dusted it 40 times. This morning it is lying on the window seat instead, face down open, and the pages inside do not belong to any sermon. The running top line says Pride and Prejudice. It is a novel, one of the ones got quietly from the circulating library and read behind a plainer cover, because a young lady's reading is inspected the way her posture is, and novels are held by serious persons to inflame the imagination. Held so, you notice, chiefly by persons who have not read them. You stand there with your duster and read 11 lines about a Mr. Collins, and have to put the book down exactly as you found it, face down, because you are smiling too hard to trust yourself. You dust the false sermons with particular respect after that. Mark them. They have 2 moments coming, one small and soon, one at the very end of the year, in the last quiet evening of all, and the second one is worth the wait. And through all of this is the thing you notice by April, the shape under everything. The house itself keeps the rhythm of the dinner table. The men leave, and the real work begins. His lordship goes down to the House of Lords, or to White's, or to Newmarket for weeks together, and the moment the street door shuts behind him, the house does not fall idle. It accelerates. Her ladyship has the steward in with his books before the wheels of his lordship's chaise are off the cobbles. The morning room fills with lists and letters. Whole campaigns are planned. Dinners, alliances, the delicate reduction of a debt. Then his lordship returns, and the house resumes its performance of being merely elegant, and he moves through it like a guest of honour, pleased with how smoothly a house runs itself. A house runs itself the way fires light themselves. You could tell him. Nobody will ever tell him. Then, one evening in the second week of April, the bells begin. Not the 6 o'clock bells. All the bells, every steeple in London at once, and gunfire from the parks, and by dark the whole city is on fire with light. The news has come with the mails, and it is real, and it is confirmed. Bonaparte has abdicated. The Emperor of the French, the ogre of 20 years, the man whose name mothers used to frighten children in your village, has signed away his throne at Fontainebleau, and is to be packed off to a little island called Elba. And the long war, the war that has run your whole life, you were born into it. There are grown men in this house who cannot remember peace. The war is over. London goes gently mad. Every house that owns a candle puts candles in every window. The illuminations, they are called, and they are not optional. A dark window on a peace night gets its glass broken by the crowd, patriotism enforced at a brick's pace. You and Kitty spend 2 hours lighting and setting candles in every one of the 19 front windows of Marchwood House, and Thomas fixes coloured transparencies in the 3 big ones, and when you finally step out onto the pavement to see, The whole of Curzon Street is a wall of trembling gold, and the crowd flows down it singing, gentlefolk and pickpockets and clerks and soldiers all pressed together, and above the rooftops to the east rockets are climbing up from the river and coming apart in slow silver rain. Kitty grips your arm hard enough to bruise. She is crying and laughing at once. "Over," she keeps saying. "It's over, Anne. It's over." You are 16. You stand in the middle of a lit street with your friend's arm in yours and the war ending over your head, and you think this is the biggest night you will ever see. You are wrong twice. There is a bigger night coming in August, and there is a smaller, stranger truth coming underneath it. You will learn more about what this piece means from 1 hour in a drawing room than from all the rockets in London. Because upstairs, on the peace night itself, while the street sings, Lady Verney sits by her ladyship's fire worrying a dry biscuit to pieces, and says the sentence you will remember in March, a year from now, when you and the whole world find out what it was worth. "Elba," she says. Snap goes the vinaigrette. "They have put him on an island, my dear, 12 miles off the coast of Italy, and left him his title and 1,000 men of his own guard. I have seen weeds pulled up with more thoroughness. Pray God I am an old fool." Her ladyship pours the tea and says nothing at all. Her ladyship's silences, you are learning, are the most exactly weighed things in the house. May comes in warm, and with it 2 arrivals, one in a brown paper parcel and one in a blue coat. The parcel comes from Hatchard's, the bookseller at the bottom of Piccadilly, and it is addressed to Lady Georgiana, and by the time it has passed through the kitchen everyone knows it is books, 3 volumes, new. What the kitchen does not know, and you do, because you are the one who carries the parcel up, and because Lady Georgiana opens it while you are still laying her fire, is what the books are. Mansfield Park, a novel, in 3 volumes, by the author of Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice. No name, there is never a name. Whoever writes these books signs them only by a lady, and half the drawing rooms of London have an opinion about her, and nobody knows so much as whether she is one lady or 3. Lady Georgiana reads the first volume in 2 days. You know the schedule of it exactly, because you find the full sermon binding lying about at each stage of its migration, window seat, dressing table, once under the bolster itself, which argues reading by candle past midnight, which is against her mother's rule and very hard on candles. And on the second evening, reshelving the brown calf volume, you turn and she is in the doorway watching you. You go still. The wrong kind of still. Caught still. Lady Georgiana looks at you, and at the false sermons in your hand, and at you again. 19 looking at 16. And what she says in the end quite evenly is, "The sermons improve on a second reading. Don't you find?" "I couldn't say, my lady," you say. "I only dust them." Something moves at the corner of her mouth. It is not quite a smile. It is the promissory note for one. "Good," she says, and goes, and nothing is said. But it is a different nothing now. It is a nothing you're both holding one end of, and a week later, when a list in her hand appears on the hall table for the circulating library in Bond Street, it is somehow understood, without one word having been exchanged, that Anne is the one who fetches the books, and Anne is the one who brings them up, folded in her apron, past whatever eyes there are to pass, and Anne does not read the titles aloud in the kitchen. Carry it in, carry it out, say nothing. Mrs. Bell taught you the rule as drudgery. It turns out to be the exact skill the whole world upstairs runs on. You're becoming, in the smallest possible way, a person Lady Georgiana banks with. The blue coat is Mr. Rowan. You hear of him long before you see him, which is the way of this world. Everyone important arrives first as talk. It is a Tuesday, of course, and Lady Verney has him in her net before he has been in London a month. Mr. Edward Rowan, a younger son of a good Northamptonshire family, 28, called to the bar at Lincoln's Inn, and, here the vinaigrette snaps, actually working at it, which in Lady Verney's vocabulary is somewhere between an eccentricity and a wonder. Perhaps £3,000 a year, when a certain elderly uncle is done with the world, quiet, sensible, dances tolerably, talks less than he listens. A man who listens, says Lady Verney, at 28, depend upon it, my dear, he will either go far or be entirely destroyed. And against him, in the other scale, the old Baron. He's never anything but the Baron in the talk you stand and hear. A widower of 57, with a good name, 12,000 a year, an abbey in Somerset, and gout. He has begun to be very attentive to Lady Georgiana. He sends fruit from his succession houses. He sits beside her at dinners with the terrible patience of a man who has decided, and his lordship. This is the current that runs under the whole summer. His lordship is for him. You know why his lordship is for him. You kneel at the grate at 1 in the morning. You have heard the red book being balanced. 12,000 a year does not need a daughter's portion paid promptly, can wait for it, might, gracefully, in certain arrangements between gentlemen, forgive pieces of it altogether. Somewhere in the arithmetic of White's, a debt and a daughter have ended on the same page. The men, having decided, consider the matter as good as done. The men then leave the room, for Ascot, for the house, for the club, and the campaign that actually decides it is conducted entirely in their absence, at the tea-table, by 3 women over about 6 weeks, and you stand at the wall for every engagement of it, and it is the best schooling you will ever get in anything. Understand. Not once does her ladyship say a word against the Baron. That is not how the game is played. A wife who opposes her husband openly loses always, because the law and the money and the last word are all his. What her ladyship does instead is arrange for truth to be discovered. The Baron is invited to dinner, twice, kindness itself. At the tea-table afterward, when the door is closed, his lordship's candidate is never abused, merely examined, the way her ladyship examines a tradesman's bill. Lady Verney, who knew his first wife, contributes intelligence in the driest possible voice. What the first marriage was, why the Somerset Abbey needs a new roof, and what that argues about the 12,000 a year, the Baron's mother's temper and his own, and the difference between a man's manners at a Mayfair dinner and his manners at his own table in the country, which she compares to the difference between shop front and warehouse. Lady Georgiana sits with her cup and listens, and is never told what to think. That is the artistry of it. She simply furnished, item by item, with everything she would need in order to think it. And once, only once, the door being closed, and the men 2 floors below with the port, her ladyship sets down the teapot and says to her daughter, in the flat voice of the red ledger, "The realest thing you hear said all year. Whatever you choose, you will choose with your eyes open. That is all my mother did not do for me, and all I will do for you. Marriage, my love, is the one profession we are bred to, the one contract we may not draft, and the one gamble we are made to play but once. So we will study the table before we sit down at it. More tea?" Snap from the corner very softly goes the vinaigrette. Meanwhile, London itself has run mad again, because the Tsar has come. This is June of 1814, the summer of the sovereigns, Alexander of Russia, the King of Prussia, marshals and princes, and the whole glittering wreckage of 20 years of war, all come to celebrate the peace. The Tsar refuses the apartments prepared for him and puts up at the Pulteney Hotel on Piccadilly, where his sister, the Grand Duchess, is staying, and Piccadilly simply stops. Crowds stand 10 deep from morning to night for a glimpse of him at the balcony. When he rides out, they take the horses from carriages and pull them by hand. You see at once sent to Hatchard's for the library list with strict orders to be an hour and no more. You give up trying to walk the pavement at all, and stand squeezed against the railings while the mob roars at a first-floor window, and a whiskered old Cossack general called Platov, the crowd's darling, they bawl his name like a toast, sits his horse in the middle of it, looking as if he has seen livelier things on fire. "An hour and no more," said Mrs. Bell. "You're back in 58 minutes, having seen an emperor, or at least an emperor's window. In this city, in this summer, that errand counts as an ordinary morning. The drawing-rooms drink the sovereigns like wine, and Lady Verney's Tuesdays are standing room only in reported speech, which hostesses have secured a prince. What the Grand Duchess said at Carlton House that made the Regent go the colour of his coat, whether the Tsar is beautiful or only tall, and at the great subscription balls and the masquerade at Burlington House in July. 2,000 guests, the papers say. The season burns itself out in one long blaze, and through all of it, steady as a pulse under fever, the tea-table campaign proceeds, because Mr. Rowan too comes to dinner, once in June, twice in July. And here is what you see from the wall, and what the tea-table sees, and what his lordship, who is generally at the other end of the table being loud about the war, does not. Mr. Rowan listens. When Lady Georgiana speaks, he attends to the sentence and answers the sentence, the actual one, not the prettier and stupider sentence a young lady is presumed to have meant. At whist he partners her ladyship, plays soundly, loses 11 shillings with perfect temper, and her ladyship tells Lady Verney this on the following Tuesday, and both women go quiet over it, like jewellers over a stone. He counts the cards, counts them well, says nothing about it. A man who counts and does not boast of counting. "And when the door closed," asks Lady Verney, "and we withdrew, what did he do then?" "He looked at the door," says her ladyship, "for slightly too long, as if he thought the better half of the conversation had just left the room." The vinaigrette does not snap. Lady Verney holds it, turning it, an old woman thinking. "Then he is either the one man in London worth the candle," she says at last, "or the most dangerous kind of fortune hunter. I shall find out which. Give me a fortnight." It takes her 9 days, and the intelligence comes back through 3 drawing-rooms and a modiste's fitting-room, from a lady whose late husband's affairs passed through the same inn. Mr. Rowan's accounts are plain, his debts none, his uncle real, and his listening, by every report, lifelong. The system works. The system, you begin to understand standing at your wall, is the fastest and most accurate engine of inquiry in the British Isles. It costs nothing, it never sleeps, and it is entirely composed of women who the law does not permit to sign their own names to a lease. The men never ask what the ladies do after dinner. If they knew, you think, kneeling at the grate at 1 in the morning while her ladyship's nib ticks away behind you, they would never leave a room again. By rights, the 1st of August should find Mayfair half empty. That is the rhythm you have learned without being taught. Parliament rises. The brass knockers are unscrewed from the great front doors. A blank door means a family gone. It is the hatchment of the living. The shutters close, and fashionable London rolls away to its estates in a river of yellow-wheeled carriages, leaving the street to caretakers and cats. Kitty says that in an ordinary August you can hear your own footsteps on Curzon Street at noon. This is not an ordinary August. The government has proclaimed a Grand Jubilee for the 1st of the month, and the whole city has stayed to see it. The date has been chosen to do 3 jobs at once, which is very like this government. It is 100 years to the day since the House of Hanover came to the throne. It is the anniversary of Nelson's victory at the Nile, and it is the people's share of the peace, the public's own festival, now that the princes and sovereigns have had theirs. The regent has ordered the parks turned into one vast fairground. All 3 of the royal parks together, Hyde Park, Green Park, St. James's, thrown open at once. You have watched it being built in glimpses, on errands, all through July. In Green Park, 10 minutes walk from your own area steps, carpenters have raised a castle. An actual castle, 100 feet across, timber and painted canvas, with ramparts and a flagstaff, and nobody will say what it is for. In St. James's Park they have thrown a Chinese bridge across the canal, and out of the middle of the bridge grows a pagoda, 7 stories of it, blue and gold, every story hung with lamps, its reflection already practising in the water. In Hyde Park the booths go up by the 100. Drinking booths, eating booths, swings, roundabouts, print-in stalls ready to strike off souvenirs the way they did on the frozen river in February. A canvas town with streets of its own. The newspapers grumble at the cost in one column and print the programme in the next. Trade always finds a way. The house divides for the night along its usual seam. The family will see the Jubilee like gentlefolk, her ladyship and Lady Georgiana from the windows of a friend's house at the top of St. James's Street, his lordship from the bow window of White's, where the book has taken wages on the height of the rockets. The servants will see it like London. Mrs. Bell assembles you all in the kitchen at 6 and issues the evening like rations. Those who can be spared may go out at 8, in pairs, back by 1, and anyone who comes home the worse for gin will wish the mob had kept them. Thomas will walk with you and Kitty, she says. Mind your pockets, mind the crush. If a crowd begins to press, get out of it sideways. Sideways, mind, never straight back. You will remember that sentence before midnight. The first wonder comes in the afternoon, before you're even out of your apron. A roar rolls up from the south, thousands of throats together, and you and Kitty hang out of the attic window like Washing and See, rising slowly out of the trees of Green Park. A balloon. Mr. Sadler's balloon, striped and shining. A thing the size of a house, with a boat slung beneath it, and a man in the boat waving a flag no bigger than a handkerchief. It climbs the evening air as if the air were stairs, catches the sun the street has already lost, and goes away east on the wind, over the smoke of the whole city, until it is a full stop, and then nothing at all. Kitty does not say one word the entire time. When it is gone, she lets out her breath and says, and I have seen that now in the voice of a woman settling an account, at 8 you go out into it. And when I say the parks are crowded, I need you to understand what that means tonight, in this city. The papers will guess afterwards at 250,000 people in the 3 parks together. Some say more, and standing in it you would believe any figure at all. It is not a crowd you walk through. It is a crowd you are digested by. Dust hangs over Piccadilly like flour in a mill. The air is gingerbread and trampled grass, hot tallow from the eating booths, tar smoke from the links, spilt ale, spilt gin and gunpowder. Always, under everything tonight gunpowder. Ballad singers are selling the Jubilee in rhyme at a penny the sheet. A man with a tray sells slices of a gingerbread castle. Same as the one in the park, he bawls, and his won't keep you waiting. Every third stall pours gin, and by 10 o'clock the ground itself seems to sway a little, with the number of people who have drunk it. Thomas manages the three of you through it like a waterman working a tide he knows. 6'1" is a useful height in a crowd. You and Kitty each take an arm and go where he goes. On the Serpentine, at dusk, they fight the Battle of the Nile again. Model frigates, but not toys. Vessels big enough to carry their crews rigged and gunned. And when the firing begins, the noise comes across the water and hits you in the breastbone like a fist. Smoke rolls over the lake until the ships are only orange stabs inside a cloud. The French squadron burns, strikes, sinks by instalments, exactly as it did 16 years ago in Aboukir Bay, and 100,000 Londoners cheer the arranged past as if it were happening fresh in front of them. Which, you suppose, is the whole business of this year. The war is over. Tonight the war is a show. Kitty shouts herself hoarse. You cheer too, and could not afterwards say exactly for what. Full dark, and Green Park, and the castle. At the appointed hour the guns begin. Real guns, park artillery, firing blank thunder that you feel through the soles of your shoes, and the whole timber fortress is bombarded with fire. Rockets stand up off its ramparts in sheaves. Roman candles pour from its walls. The smoke wraps the whole 100 feet of it until it is nothing but a burning cloud with a heartbeat, and the crowd around you goes quiet. The particular quiet of too much to look at. And then, this is the trick of it, the transformation the entire night was built to deliver. The smoke thins, and the castle is gone. In its place, turning slowly, lit by lamps behind painted silk, stands a temple. The Temple of Concord, the programme calls it. Peace, pictured in allegory, revolving, glowing from the inside where half an hour ago there was a fortress under fire. That is the intended lesson, plain as a sermon. War becomes peace. The castle becomes the temple, and all it takes is smoke and machinery. The crowd roars its approval of the machinery. You're still watching the temple turn when Kitty's fingers close on your wrist and she says, Anne, the pagoda. You look south, over the black tops of the trees towards St. James's Park. The 7-story pagoda on the Chinese bridge has been part of the show all evening, lit with gas, hung with lamps, throwing rockets of its own. It is throwing more fire than ever now, whole gouts of it, gold and ragged, out of its upper stories. For a moment the crowd around you applauds it. Then the colour of the light changes, and even at this distance you can see that it is the wrong colour. Not the trained gold of lamp work, but the loose, hungry orange of a chimney fire, of a thing burning that was never meant to burn. And the top of the pagoda stands inside its own flame like a wick. It's a light, Thomas says quietly. The rockets have fired it. The upper stories go one into the next, the way a paper spill burns down toward the fingers. Burning fragments drop into the canal and go out. You cannot hear the hiss at this distance, but you have doused enough grates that your body supplies it. Then the whole gilded top of it leans, very slowly, like a man in church losing his fight with sleep, and folds down into the stories below in a standing burst of sparks. And a sound comes across the park that is half a gasp and half, from the drunker margins of the crowd, who believe it is all in the programme, a cheer. and then the other sound. It runs through the crowd the way the fire ran through the pagoda, mouth to mouth, faster than any newspaper will ever move. There were men on it. The lamplighters, there were men still on it. Nobody around you knows anything, and everybody around you is certain. That is how a crowd knows things, and a crowd that has been all night a warm animal enjoying itself becomes, in about a minute, a cold one that wants to be somewhere else. Some of it pushes south, toward the fire to sea. Most of it pushes north and west, away toward the gates, toward Piccadilly. You are in the west of the park with the temple at your back and perhaps 20,000 people deciding, all at once, to use the same 3 gates that you are near. The pressure arrives before any person arrives. That is the thing nobody tells you about a crush. It comes through the crowd like a tide through water, bodies packing tighter without anyone visibly moving, and suddenly your arms are pinned to your sides and your feet are taking small, stumbling, obligatory steps you have not ordered, and your breath is being managed out of you an inch at a time. Sideways, mind, never straight back. Thomas gets his shoulder ahead of you like the bow of a boat. Sideways, he says in your ear, calm as a man passing the salt, and the 3 of you go crabwise, giving up ground toward the gate in exchange for ground toward the edge, trading distance for looseness, and it works exactly the way Mrs. Bell said it would, the press thinning with every sideways yard until the 3 of you spill out of the current near the wall along Constitution Hill into air you can have as much of as you like, which is where you find the woman on the ground. She is nobody. That is the exact truth of it, and the whole point of it. A woman of perhaps 40 in a print gown, some tradesman's wife out for the Jubilee like all the world, gone down in the crush at the edge of the current and been walked on. Not trampled, quite, but stepped over and stepped against until she has stopped being able to get up. And the crowd is parting around her the way water parts around a stone, every single person in it certain that someone else has the matter in hand. A boy of 6 or so stands over her, screaming in the fixed, mechanical way children scream when the bottom has gone out of the world. And a carriage stopped in the press 10 feet away. Stopped this last quarter of an hour, going nowhere, like every carriage between here and St. James's, opens its own door, and Lady Verney gets down out of it. 62 years old, onto trampled grass, at midnight, at the edge of a crowd that has already knocked one woman down. She has her stick in one hand, and she comes through the loose fringe of the crush with it as if the crowd were a drawing room inconveniently arranged. And she looks down at the woman and up at the ring of watching, useless faces, and she becomes, in one breath, the voice that dinner-table Mayfair has been obeying for 40 years. Stand back, give her air. You, sir, your arm, she's not a sack of meal. You, girl, and this is you, she's looking straight at you, and there is not one flicker of surprise in her face. She has had your measure all along the way, she has the measure of everything. Marchwood's girl, your shawl. You have the shawl off before you know you have moved. Folded under the woman's head. Lady Verney lowers herself onto one knee. You hear the knee, everyone pretends not to, and takes from her wrist the little silver-gilt box on its chain and snaps it open. All spring and all summer you have watched that vinaigrette punctuate scandal. Snap, click, one sniff of aromatic vinegar to garnish somebody's ruin at a tea table. This is the worst night of the summer, and this is the vinaigrette's great moment, and it is not punctuation. She passes the pierced gold grill slowly under the woman's nose, once, twice, and the vinegar cuts through the smoke and the gin and the crushed grass like a pin through silk, and the woman's face convulses, and she coughs, and her eyes open. And the first thing Lady Verney says to her, in the voice you will hear ever afterwards whenever anyone talks sense in a catastrophe, is, "There you are. You are bruised, not broken. Don't try to talk yet. Your boy is here, and has excellent lungs." The woman is helped up at last. The man lends his arm, meek as a schoolboy, and set on the carriage step to breathe, and the boy stops screaming as suddenly as a kettle taken off the fire, and burrows into her side. The whole thing is over in 10 minutes. The crowd flows on. London swallows the incident the way London swallows everything. Lady Verney gets to her feet by way of her stick and your shoulder, neither asking leave nor apologising, and looks for a moment at the glow above St. James's Park, and then at you and Kitty, a long, dry, cataloguing look. "The papers will call tonight a triumph," she says, and so it was, no doubt, for everyone at a first-floor window. "Go home, the pair of you. Nothing good happens in a crowd after midnight. I have it on the authority of every crowd since the flood. Tell your mistress I said you did well. She's back in the carriage before you remember to curtsy. The carriage, of course, does not move for another half hour. But moving was never the point of a carriage. You and Kitty and Thomas walk home along a Piccadilly as bright as day and as loud as noon, threading the spilling out of the greatest party this city has ever thrown itself, and none of you says very much. Your shawl smells of vinegar and another woman's hair powder. Your ears ring. Behind you the Temple of Concord goes on serenely turning, lit from within, while south of it the wreck of the pagoda hisses into the canal. Mrs. Bell is in the kitchen when you come in at midnight, sitting up with a single candle and the household keys in her lap, which is how you learn that she does not go to bed until her people are counted. She takes the whole night off your faces in one glance and says only, "Bed." 6 o'clock comes all the same. It does. You're on your knees in the drawing room at 6:30 with a black lead, and your hair still smells of gunpowder, and with your small beer at breakfast comes the reckoning, carried in with the milk and the morning papers. One of the lamplighters on the pagoda is dead, fallen or burned. The accounts differ, and others are hurt, and 2 of the little ships sank in earnest on the Serpentine, and the parks look, in the grey morning light, like the day after a battle that everybody won. The fair in Hyde Park is meant to close, and does not. It runs on for days, booths and swings and gin, until the Regent himself has to order it done, and the grass of 3 parks is dead until spring, and the newspapers do sums about the cost in a tone her ladyship would never permit herself at the Red Book. In this city even wonders keep accounts. 1 temple, 1 triumph, 1 lamplighter. Nobody upstairs speaks of him twice. At the tea-table on Tuesday, Lady Verney speaks of him once, which is how you learn that once is what remembering looks like in a world that has agreed to be delighted. Snap goes the vinaigrette over some baronet's mortgages as usual. But you have seen what else that little box can do now. You watch it differently forever after. The week after the Jubilee passes slowly. You find yourself thinking about it at odd moments. Not the temple, which was the point of the night, but the pagoda, which was not. The slow lean of the burning stories, the way a crowd knows things before any single person in it does. The weight of a stranger's head through a folded shawl. It fades, eventually, the way all things fade. But it leaves something behind, a weight you didn't have before, and one more sentence filed away, in the small collection of sentences you now own next to your mother's. Sideways, mind, never straight back. You begin to suspect that half of surviving anything, a crush, a kitchen, a season, is knowing which way sideways is. Then, in the middle of August, the knocker comes off your own front door. The family goes down to Marchwood, his lordship's seat in Wiltshire, for the shooting and the autumn. It takes 4 days to pack them and 1 morning to lose them. The travelling chariot and the baggage coach filling the street, the second footman up behind in plain livery, hampers and imperials and her ladyship's locked dressing case handed out like relics. Thomas stays in town because the plate stays in town, and the plate does not sleep alone. Lady Georgiana's books go down into her own little hand trunk, and it is you who wrap them, at her quiet word, the false sermons laid reverently on top, where any inspecting eye would be most bored by them. One cannot get novels in Wiltshire, she says, watching you knot the cord. One can get sermons anywhere. It is among the great injustices. Then the wheels go away over the cobbles, and the house exhales, and for 6 weeks it belongs to you. I need you to understand what a great London house is like with the family out of it, because almost nobody who has not worked in one has ever seen it. Upstairs the rooms are put to sleep, chandeliers bagged in Holland, sofas shrouded, curtains pinned into sheets, the very mirrors veiled like widows, and below the house works harder than it has all year, because this is when the real cleaning happens, the cleaning that cannot be done invisibly, the cleaning that would horrify the quality precisely because it shows the house for the machine it is. The chimneys are swept, all 14 of them, and for 2 days everything you touch tastes of soot. The carpets go down to the mews over the shoulders of 2 hired porters and are beaten on lines until the dust comes off them in brown weather. The great chandelier is lowered on its chain, and every lustre, there are 306. You count them twice because Mrs. Bell requires the number to come out the same both times, is dipped and wiped in gin and water, which is what gin is actually good for, whatever the poor of St. Giles have decided. And you clean the pale green silk of the drawing-room walls with day-old bread, working from the cornice down, rubbing the crumb along the weave until it comes away grey, and the silk brightens to a shade you did not know it had lost. 400 pounds of wool, dressed down with the twopenny loaf. There is a sermon in that somewhere, but it is August, and you are too busy to preach it. The hours are easier all the same. There are evenings when the work is done by 8, and you and Kitty sit out on the area steps in the last of the light while she teaches you piquet with a greasy old pack that is missing the 3 of clubs, so that every game carries a small secret flaw, like everything else in this city. The watchman goes by at 10 and calls the hour to a street of shrouded houses. In September you turn 17. Kitty gives you a yard of cherry-coloured ribbon and stands over you until you agree to wear it on your Sunday bonnet instead of saving it. You write to your mother. You write small, and then you turn the sheet sideways and write across your own lines, because your mother must pay the postage at her end, and a second sheet would double it. And you tell her about the balloon, and the frozen river, and the wedding there is beginning to be talk of. You do not tell her about the crush at Constitution Hill. Mothers at 30 miles distance need exactly as much truth as is good for them. And once in the whole year, you see the city the way the pigeons see it. The Jubilee left its litter over half Mayfair, rocket sticks in the gutters, on the roofs, spiked through more than one skylight. After the first hard rain of September, a cistern head on the roof of Marchwood House chokes on one, and a grey stain spreads across a top-floor ceiling and Mrs. Bell, who does not pay slaters to pull sticks out of gutters, sends Thomas up through the attic trap in his shirt sleeves and sends you up after him to hold the pail and hand the tools. You come out of the trap onto the leads, into wind, and the city knocks the breath clean out of you. You've lived in London 11 months, and you've seen it the way a mouse sees a larder. Corridors, corners, errands, walls. Now the whole of it lies out flat in the September light, and it does not end. A forest of chimney stacks marches away in every direction, thin kitchen smoke standing up from 1,000 of them like stubble burning. Below you, Curzon Street is a crack between rooftops with a toy coal cart in it. South, past the green of the parks, you can see the scorched brown patch in Green Park where the temple stood, a bruise the exact shape of a wonder. The towers of Westminster Abbey stand grey against the river light, and east, above the haze of sea coal smoke that the city wears like a hat, hangs the dome of St. Paul's. Wren's dome, finished in 1710, 365 feet from the pavement to the top of the cross, a foot, they say, for every day of the year. From the street it is a building. From up here it is a planet riding the smoke, further away than you thought and bigger than you believed, and beyond it the masts on the river stand thick as a mown field, and beyond them the hills of Surrey lie blue and soft as things seen in water. 500,000 people, and more, in the bowl of that smoke, every chimney a fire, every fire a grate, every grate somebody on their knees at 6 in the morning. You are one girl on one roof with a pail in your hand, one pair of hands out of 1,000,000 pairs, barely a cog in the smallest wheel of it. But you're here. You're in it. The machine is monstrous, and you are part of the machine, and there is a kind of dizzy comfort in that which you could not explain to anyone in Aldbury if you wrote crossways on 10 sheets. Thomas digs the rocket stick out of the cistern head, holds it up, a yard of charred deal that flew over London on the 1st of August trailing fire, then pitches it down into the yard and goes back to the gutter, entirely unmoved. Thomas has been on this roof before. Thomas, you're coming to understand, has been everywhere before and has made a religion of being unimpressed. It is Mrs. Bell who surprises you. She comes up through the trap herself, steady as a sexton on the ladder, which answers a question you'd never dared ask, to inspect the gutter, because in this house even the lead is inspected, and then, the gutter approved, she does not go down. She stands on the leads with her hands folded and her keys quiet against her skirt, and she looks out over the city for a long minute, and something in her face as it stays loosened, just slightly, just up here where there is nobody to see it but the pigeons and you. I came up to London at 15, she says, not exactly to you. From Norfolk, 34 years, girl, and I've kept other people's houses, every one of them. Scullery, kitchen, still room, and up, same road you're walking. I have a sister widowed in Dis, and a sum put by. That is my business and nobody's else's. And when I am done here there is a cottage in it, and a garden, and hens. I have kept other people's houses all my life. I intend to die keeping my own. She turns and looks at you then, and it is the same magistrate's look that found the one crumb of cinder on the hearth in February, but aimed, this once, somewhere altogether different. Serve the house, Anne, serve it well. Good service is wages and a good character, and don't you ever let anyone teach you to be ashamed of it. But don't mistake the house for the world. The house will forget you the week you leave it. The silk will not remember who brightened it, and the quality will not remember who carried the tray. So you keep something that's yours. Kitty tells me you check your mother's needles every night. Good. That is the sense in you. A girl who keeps her own tools has somewhere to stand. She looks out once more at the smoke and the dome and the blue hills past it all. From up here you can see the whole city, she says, and the whole city can't see you. That is the bargain of our lives, girl. Mind you're the one who chose it. Now come down off these leads before the pair of you fall through and cost me a slater after all. You go down the ladder into the dark of the attics with the smell of wind still in your apron, and you carry that morning with you for the rest of your life, the way you carry the needle case, out of sight, checked often. The family comes back in the 3rd week of October, and the knocker goes on the door, and the holland comes off the furniture, and the house resumes its performance. The plane trees drop their leaves into the area steps faster than you can sweep them. The lamplighter. You never once used to notice lamplighters. Now you notice everyone. Makes his round earlier each evening, and the first fogs come up off the river, the true London kind, yellow-grey, tasting of sulphur, thick enough that the houses across the street soften like things seen through steamed glass. And the Tuesday's resume, and the tea table takes up its winter business, and the winter business is Vienna. Because the peace, it turns out, was only the agreement to stop shooting. The shape of the world is being settled now at a congress in Vienna, where the emperors and kings and their ministers have been gathered since the autumn, dividing the map like a goose at Michaelmas. The drawing-rooms of London follow it through letters, and Lady Verney's letters are better than the newspapers and a week fresher. The joke going round Europe arrives by way of her, delivered dry as biscuit. The Congress dances, but it does not march. Balls every night, they say, and nothing signed by morning. And while they dance, she says, one Tuesday in November, with the fog standing at the windows like a fourth caller, wheat that sold at better than 120 shillings the quarter 2 years ago goes begging at 70 odd now. Peace is very hard on the landed interest, my dear. Their corn must compete with everyone else's again, and when the landed interest squeals, Parliament suckles it. There will be a bill, mark me, and bread will not be a farthing cheaper next year, whatever the peace has promised the people who eat it. Her ladyship paws and says nothing, and you stand at the wall and file it away. 70 shillings the quarter, there will be a bill, with no idea at all yet that you have just heard next spring described to the shilling. After the roof, something shifts in you. Nothing you could point to and name a day for. But the house has stopped being a maze and become a map. You know it now the way Kitty knew it when you came. The creak of the 4th stair from the landing, which tradesmen weigh their thumbs. How long a pause means yes at the tea table, and how long a pause means never. The weeks turn into months without asking your leave. And through the fog and the shortening days, the campaign that will decide Lady Georgiana's whole life moves quietly to its end, and you are at the wall for all of it. The Baron comes back up from Somerset at the end of October, gouty and gallant, and is asked to dinner, because her ladyship's method has never once been to bar a door. It is a dinner of 10. You're on the landing, Thomas is at the sideboard, and it is Thomas who, without meaning to and without any possibility of meaning to, ends the whole thing. He is pouring claret at the Baron's shoulder, and Thomas pours the way Mrs. Bell inspects, which is to say perfectly, when the Baron reaches for the glass while the wine is still moving, and a thread of claret crosses his cuff. One thread, half a spoonful. The Baron does not shout. Shouting would have been survivable. He goes very still, and then he says, pleasantly, to the table at large in the voice of a man sharing a proven method. In my house, a servant who cannot pour learns it on his own back. Somerset air is wonderfully improving that way. And he laughs, to show it is wit. He laughs alone. His lordship, 2 bottles in, laughs half a beat late, which is worse than not at all, and you watch, from the landing through the open door, exactly 2 faces. You watch Thomas's face, which shows precisely nothing, because showing nothing is the whole craft of his position. But you have stood next to that nothing for a year, and you can read the temperature of it, and you watch Lady Georgiana, who is looking neither at the Baron nor at her plate. She's looking at Thomas's face too. She's 19, and she has lived her whole life in a house where the servants are furniture, and you can see her, in real time, in candlelight, discovering that the furniture has a face. Nothing is said. Of course nothing is said. The dinner proceeds, the ladies withdraw, the door closes, and at the tea table with the men 2 floors below, and the kettle just beginning to mutter, Lady Verney sets down her cup and delivers the verdict of the year in the driest voice in England. Shop front and warehouse, my dear. I have told you since the spring. Never mind his manners to you. A man courting shows you the shop front. Watch his manners to those who cannot answer him back. That is the warehouse, and the warehouse is where he actually lives. Well, tonight the gentleman was kind enough to conduct us all through the warehouse. There is a silence. Her ladyship measures the green leaf into the pot, unhurried, as if the room were discussing weather. Then Lady Georgiana says, Mamma, about Somerset. No. 2 words and a county. That is all. Her voice does not tremble and does not rise. It is the flat, weighed voice of the Red Ledger, her mother's voice, arrived in the next generation intact. Very well, says her ladyship, and pause. And that, you understand, standing at the wall with the tray, watching 3 women drink tea, is the whole battle. That is Trafalgar. His lordship will take another 6 weeks to discover that the war is over, because nobody will tell him. The campaign will simply be arranged around him, the way the house is cleaned around the family. Wars end where they are decided, not where they are announced. The rest is arithmetic, and the arithmetic falls like a house of cards in a draught. In the 2nd week of November, Mr. Rowan's uncle in Northamptonshire is done with the world at last, quietly, in his bed at 81. And Mr. Rowan comes to his next dinner in black gloves, and the 3,000 a year stops being a prospect and becomes a fact, with a small estate standing behind it. And on the Tuesday following, Lady Verney arrives with the last load of intelligence, gathered the way she gathers everything. 3 drawing-rooms, a modiste's fitting-room, and a lady whose late husband's man of business knew Somerset. The Abbey roof, my dear, is not a roof. It is a subscription. There are 2 mortgages registered against the estate, registered where anyone with a lawyer and sixpence may read them, and a jointure to the first wife's people that would keep a frigate at sea. Your 12,000 a year is nearer 7, and it wants feeding. Which explains, does it not, the gentleman's celebrated patience about the portion. He was not being delicate. He was being hungry. Snap goes the vinaigrette, and this time it sounds like a full stop. What passes between her ladyship and his lordship you do not hear. That conversation happens behind the one door in the house you never pass. But you are in the drawing-room at 1 o'clock that same week, kneeling at the grate, and behind you on the little French writing table, the red book lies open beside a single sheet of figures in her ladyship's upright hand. A sheet ruled into 2 columns, 1 column for a baron, 1 for a barrister, everything reckoned. the roof, the mortgages, the jointure, the 3,000 made solid, the cost of waiting against the cost of choosing. The whole marriage question turned into what it always secretly was, a page of accounts. She has made the numbers stand where a man must trip over them. The men sign, the women reckon, and once in a great while, if the reckoning is laid exactly right, the reckoning decides what gets signed. The Baron's grapes stop coming before the month is out. Nobody remarks it. In Mayfair, that is a death notice. Mr. Rowan is shown into his lordship's library on a Tuesday morning in the second week of December, and stays 20 minutes, and comes out with the face of a man who has argued his one great case and won it. The settlements will be drawn in his own inn, which the kitchen finds richly funny. A bridegroom who drafts, a husband who reads what he signs. The engagement is announced at small dinner 2 nights later, and below stairs it arrives the way all upstairs news arrives, 10 minutes ahead of the announcement by way of Thomas. His lordship sends down 2 bottles of port for the hall, which is the first entirely likeable thing you've known him to do, and the cook produces a cake with no notice at all, which means she has had it waiting for a week. And in the middle of the toasts, Mrs. Bell raps the table and delivers the piece of news that belongs to your own life. When Lady Georgiana goes to her new house as Mrs. Rowan, she takes a lady's maid with her. Her ladyship's word. Mrs. Rowan must have a maid who already knows her hair. Kitty, 16 guineas a year, a room of her own in Bedford Row, and the title of it, the full title, lady's maid, at 20 years old. Kitty holds herself like a jug all evening, in front of everyone, and then comes up to the attic and sits down hard on the bed and laughs and cries into her apron at the same time, entirely without dignity, and you sit beside her with your arm around her ribs and let her. 3 years I've dressed that hair, she says when she can. 3 years, Anne, 16 guineas, a room of my own, my grand scrubbed steps in Southwark till the week she died, and I'm going to be a lady's maid in a lawyer's house, with a fire in my room. She wipes her face and looks at you sideways, glittering. Told you, didn't I? It's the ones who can't see the end of a thing that stop smiling. I always could see the end of this one. Susan comes to you a week before Christmas. She is 14, from Maidstone in Kent, and she arrives exactly as you arrived, on a carrier's cart, with 1 deal box, 1 spare shift, and a face scrubbed raw for the occasion, fright dressed up as politeness. The wheel has turned 1 full year, and now you are the one standing in the kitchen watching a green girl try not to cry into her bread and dripping, and it is your voice saying the things Kitty's voice once said to you, which stair creaks, which tradesmen cheat, how long you can warm your hands at the range before the cook notices. You hear yourself doing it, word for word, the whole catechism, and somewhere in the middle of it you understand that this is how the house actually continues, not by wages, not by keys, but by this one tired girl handing the survival of it down to the next. Her first week she cries at night, muffled, face to the wall the way you did. You pretend to be asleep the way Kitty did, because that is the kindness. And when the hard frost comes in January, and the basin freezes and Susan stands in front of it at 6 in the morning with her chin going, you take her hand, make a fist of it, and teach her to break the ice with her knuckles, not her fingertips, because her fingertips are already cracked at the corners, and the cracks open and sting if she knocks them. It gets easier, you tell her. I promise you it gets easier. She looks at you the way you must once have looked at Kitty, as if you were born knowing. Nobody is born knowing. Somebody teaches you, and then you are the one who knows, and the fact that this now feels natural is the whole story of your year. Christmas below stairs is goose, and Mrs. Bell's elderberry wine. 1 glass each, poured by her own just hands, exact to the drop. And Thomas, after his second glass, turning out to possess, of all things, a tenner, and being made to use it. On the 26th of December, the mail brings the crown of the season. Peace with America, signed at Ghent on Christmas Eve itself. 2 wars ended inside one 12-month. Kitty says the century is showing off. The deep cold comes in January, and this year the river does not freeze. You go down with Kitty on an errand and stand a minute at the top of the Waterman Stairs, where the 2 of you stood on the ice among the tents in February, and the Thames is all business, grey and quick and crowded, gulls working the wakes as if it had never once stood still with a fair on its back. There will never be another frost fair on that river. The old bridge whose piers dam the current has fewer years left than anyone guesses. But nobody on those stairs knows it, and it would not slow the river to know. Look at it, Kitty says. All business again. She tucks her hands under her arms, satisfied, proprietary, as if the river had taken her advice. You will remember her exactly like this. The wedding is set for February. St. George's, Hanover Square. Where else? The parish church. The church whose bell has owned your mornings for a year. By special licence, which costs 5 guineas at Doctors' Commons, and announces those 5 guineas with every syllable. And it will be a Tuesday, of course. Lady Verney's day. Nobody says it is in her honour. Everybody knows it is in her honour. The gown is white sarcenet, and the flounce at its hem is Brussels lace. Real Brussels, off a real boat, which is its own small monument to the year. Because 2 winters ago you could not have bought Brussels lace in London for love or money, the ports being shut and the whole continent locked against English trade. Peace has a texture, it turns out. Peace is a kind of lace arriving lawfully. The modiste in Conduit Street delivers it all in a box like a coffin for an angel, and Kitty carries it up to Lady Georgiana's room as if the Regent himself were watching her do it. The winter turns. The days lengthen by a cook's spoonful, and the house, which has spent a year teaching you that nothing in it happens by magic, begins to build a wedding. On the evening before it, the trunks corded, the boxes labelled for Bedford Row, the house wound tight as a watch. You go up to Lady Georgiana's little sitting room to do the great one last time, and she is there, by the window in the low firelight, with the shelf beside her nearly empty. The atlas is packed. The prayer book is packed. In her hands is the sober brown calf volume whose spine says, in modest gold, Sermons to Young Women. Anne, she says. It is, you realise, the first time in 16 months she has ever used your name. In the language of this house, that is a door opening. I am taking the atlas and the prayer book and my own new books, she says. The sermons I mean to leave behind. They should stay with somebody who understands their particular doctrine. She holds the volume out. They improve on a second reading. I believe I told you that once. I find I have them nearly by heart, and it is time they instructed somebody new. You take it. Inside the false sermon covers, where you once read 11 lines about a Mr. Collins, and had to stop because you were smiling too hard to trust yourself, sit the pages of Pride and Prejudice, her own copy, the first volume, bought and paid for, hers to give. Not the circulating libraries. The library must have its own back. This one is nobody's but yours. You have never in your life owned a book. You own a book. You get out, thank you, my lady, in a voice you would not have chosen, and she looks at you with that expression that is not quite a smile. the promissory note for one, redeemed at last after 9 months of interest. Good, she says, and nothing else is said, because between the two of you, nothing else has ever needed to be. That night it goes under the mattress, beside the needle case, and you check them both before you sleep. A girl with her own tools and her own book, a miser twice over now. The wedding morning begins at 5 in the dark, like every other morning of your life, except that the whole machine is running flat out by 6. Flowers coming in at the area door, the wedding breakfast building itself downstairs like a fortification, cold fowls and tongue and a cake with real sugar work, Mrs. Bell everywhere at once, her keys going like a knife grinder's wheel. The ceremony is at 11. The canons allow morning weddings only, 8 till noon, which is one more way this world keeps even its joy punctual. At 8 o'clock, catastrophe. It announces itself the way real catastrophe always does in this house, quietly from upstairs, on Kitty's white face at the turn of the back stairs. The bride is dressed too early and too eagerly. She has crossed her own sitting room in the gown, and the Brussels flounce has caught the head of a tack standing proud on the old chair by the window, the same chair the full sermons used to lie on, if you want the household god's opinion of the business, and 6 inches of the hemlace is torn on the bias. Torn, mind, not unstitched. The modiste is in Conduit Street. There is no time to send, and Brussels lace does not forgive. Kitty, who can dress hair like an angel and cannot sew past a button, stands holding the fact of it the way you hold a dropped tray. Mrs. Bell comes up, looks at the lace for exactly as long as she looked at the crumb of cinder a year ago and says, "Fetch Hartley." She sews. And so the last hour of Lady Georgiana's unmarried life finds you on your knees on her sitting-room floor with your mother's needle case unrolled on the carpet beside you, like a surgeon's kit. Red flannel, bootlace, 7 good steel needles, the bodkin, the paper of pins. You pin the tier first, matching the patterned flowers across the gap, and you choose the finest of the 7 needles, the one your mother called the wren, and you draw a thread from the lace's own raw edge to sew with, because a foreign thread will show forever, and a lace's own thread was never foreign a day in its life. And then you sew a fine seam, as your mother taught you at the kitchen table in Aldbury, before you could write your name, stitches too small to have names, tension even as breathing, work in the bias so the mend will move with the lace and not against it. The room is perfectly quiet. The bride stands still as a caryatid, careful even of her breathing. Kitty holds the light, and at some point you feel it as a change in the air and do not dare look up. Her ladyship herself is in the doorway, dressed, gloved, watching her daughter's hem and the housemaid kneeling at it. 20 minutes. You set the last stitch, bite the thread, and shake the flounce out, and the winter light comes through the lace and nothing shows. Nothing. The pattern flowers walk across the mend without stumbling. You could not find it yourself now, except that your hands know where it is. Who taught you that seam? Her ladyship asks. My mother, my lady. She taught you well. 4 words, in the flat voice of the red book, which you now know to be the highest voice she has. And kneeling there, rolling 7 needles back into red flannel, you finally hear your mother's sentence the way she meant it, all those months ago on the carrier's cart. A girl who can sew a fine seam will never be wholly at anyone's mercy. It was never about hemming. It was about this. It was about a morning when the whole great machine of rank and silk and 5-guinea licenses narrows to one girl on the floor who can do the thing that needs doing and knows it and is known for it. You're at St. George's by 10:30 in the gallery, with Susan agog beside you and Thomas below at the doors, because Mrs. Bell has ruled that those who can be spared may see it, and for once the whole house can be spared. The church is 15 minutes' walk and 90 years old, standing since 1725, and its bell, the bell that has pulled you out of sleep near 500 mornings running, is ringing for your household today. A year ago, on your first Sunday, you stood outside those columns and thought, this is where heiresses are handed across like bills of exchange. You were 16, and it was a good sentence, and you were proud of it. It is not what you see now. What you see from the gallery is a woman who studied the table before she sat down to it, who was furnished, item by item, at a tea table behind a closed door, with everything she needed in order to think, and thought. His lordship gives her away. That is the law's phrase, and the law, as usual, has not spent any time in the drawing-room. Mr. Rowan listens to the vows the way he listens to everything, as if the sentences were evidence, which today they are. He makes his own vows like a man who has read the settlement, because he drafted it. And when it is done, the two of them sign the register, her hand steady, Georgiana one last time, and there it is, the small strange fact you will keep all your life. Of all the papers that have ruled this year, the leases and licenses and mortgages and settlements, every one of them signed by men, this is the one paper the law requires a woman to sign herself. She signs. The bells let go overhead like the Jubilee. The breakfast fills the house until 3. The new Mrs. Rowan goes away to Bedford Row through a small blizzard of thrown slippers and rice, and by evening Marchwood House is quiet in a way you have never heard it. Not empty quiet like August. Finish quiet, the quiet of a machine that has delivered. Kitty goes next morning with the boxes in a hackney the Rowans send. Her last night in the attic. The two of you lie head to head in the dark like the first night, and she talks Bedford Row ceilings and Bedford Row wages until she runs down like a clock, and then she's quiet a while, and then she says, mind the 4th stair for Susan, and teach her the ice trick and the sideways trick, and which tradesmen weigh their thumbs. Somebody taught me. Somebody taught the one who taught me. That's all a house is, Anne. That's all it ever was. The ones who know, teaching the ones who don't, while the quality upstairs believe it happens by magic. In the morning she hugs you hard at the area door, says, you were greener than Susan when you came, and look at you, and goes up the steps into the street and does not look back, because Kitty Marlowe has never once in her life looked back at a thing she was finished with. The bed is wider that night, and the attic is smaller. That is what leaving does. Susan moves her deal box to Kitty's side, and within a week her breathing in the dark is just the night's furniture, the way yours must once have been to Kitty. The house continues. The house always continues. And 2 nights after the wedding, the tea caddy pays its debt. It is 11 o'clock. The house is dark, the fire's smored, and you go up to the drawing-room for the last round, and her ladyship is there. Of course she is there. At the little French writing table between the windows, one fresh candle, the red Morocco book, the spike of bills, the short column of coins arranged by size. She has sent her maid to bed. It is the exact tableau of your first Thursday night in this room a year ago, and she says the exact words. Come, do your work. You are no interruption. But when you've swept the hearth and banked the last of the fire, she says something new. "Leave that now, you stand." And her ladyship draws the ribbon from her pocket. The ribbon you've imagined for a year, the key you have dusted around like a verger, and holds it out to you across the candlelight. "Fetch me the caddy." You carry it to her the way you would carry a reliquary, the rosewood cool and dense, the brass corners printing their weight into your fingers, heavier than a full scuttle in every way that is not weight. She unlocks it herself, the two-lidded wells, the cut-glass bowl, the scallop-shell spoon. She measures and blends, black and a breath of the green. Her own hands, her own table, while the kettle you carried up mutters on its spirit lamp, and she sets out 2 cups. "You've been in this room every day for a year," she says. "You've scrubbed it, blacked it, swept it, and stood against that wall through everything this family has done in it, and you have never once tasted the tea. Sit down. There is nobody to see us, and I am too tired to be a countess before tomorrow." You sit on the edge of the chair across from her, and you drink Hyson at 12 shillings the pound out of a cup worth a month of you, and it tastes of hay and flowers and money, and no cup of anything will ever again taste quite that loud. She does not make a speech. That is not her way. You know her ways now. She says only, looking at the fire, "My daughter chose with her eyes open. Whatever else this year has been, it has been that." And then, after a while, in the voice she uses for the sums, "You mended that lace so it will outlast the marriage settlement. Your mother is a sensible woman. Tell her so when you write." Then she opens the red book, turns to a page you cannot see and would not look at, draws one line under one column. You hear the ruler, the nib, the blot, and closes it. And the closing of that book sounds like a door being shut on a whole year from the inside. "The men sign, child," she says, capping the ink. "We reckon, take the cups down, carry it in, carry it out. Say nothing." You could tell her that the rule she has just given you is the first rule you were ever taught in this house, by candlelight, at 6 in the morning, 16 months ago. You carry the cups down, and you say nothing, which is the same as telling her. And on the stairs, in the dark, with the tray in your hands, it finishes arriving. The thing that has been arriving all year. Nothing in this house happens by magic. You will see everything, girl. Everything. And you will be seen by no one. You thought, that first morning, that Mrs. Bell was describing your servitude. You began to understand otherwise on a rooftop in September, and tonight, on these dark stairs with 2 empty teacups, the understanding finishes. She was describing your power. The house cannot see you. Therefore the house hides nothing from you. Nobody guards their face in front of furniture. Nobody locks a drawer against a girl they believe cannot read the room. You have stood at the wall through a year of campaigns and audits and reckonings, and you know now how the world is actually run. Quietly, after dinner, by people everyone has agreed not to see. Mrs. Bell tells you the rest of it at the 8 o'clock inspection the next morning over her departing shoulder, in the doorway of a drawing-room that is, as always, perfect. You'll take the upper housemaid's work from Monday, £10, the white apron all day now, and wash your hands to the elbow. £2 rise and a promotion thrown over a shoulder like a coat. From Mrs. Bell, that is a triumphal arch, with trumpets. February goes out mild. March comes in with a bill. The bill is exactly the one Lady Verney promised over the fog in November. Arrived on schedule like everything she predicts. Wheat has gone on falling since the peace, and the landed men who lent the war their money at 120 shillings the quarter do not propose to live at 70. So Parliament brings in a corn bill to shut the ports to foreign grain until the price stands high again, 80 shillings the quarter by law. Bread, which the peace was to have cheapened, is to be kept dear by Act of Parliament, in the interest of the men who grow it, at the expense of the men who eat it. You do not need the red book to do this arithmetic. Every servant, every porter, every link boy in London does it in the first minute. The quartern loaf and the wages that buy it, and the act between them. London answers in the first week of March. Crowds around Westminster while the House debates, thick as the Jubilee and in no mood for fireworks. Members' carriages stopped, members hustled and hooted at their own doors, and then, after dark, the sound you've been half expecting for a year without knowing it. Glass. Mobs move through the West End by night with the names of the Bill's friends, and the houses of those friends give up their windows street by street. A house in Old Burlington Street, 10 minutes' walk from where you sleep, has its railings torn up and its parlour furniture burned in the road. The Horse Guards patrol Piccadilly in the dark, iron ringing on stone, a sound that goes through the shutters and into the teeth. Soldiers stand in the squares of Mayfair as if Mayfair were a town taken in war. His lordship is for the bill. Of course his lordship is for the bill. Wiltshire grows wheat. So the shutters of Marchwood House go up at dusk and are barred, all 19 windows, and Thomas sleeps 2 nights in the hall on a cot, with the fire irons arranged companionably to hand, and his lordship's pistols, unloaded, on the table chiefly for their looks. And you stand at the drawing-room window at dusk before the shutters close, and you think about April. 11 months ago you lit every one of these windows so the crowd would love this house, because a dark window on a peace night got its glass broken. Tonight you darken every window so the crowd cannot find it. Patriotism at a brick's pace, both ways. It is the same glass. It is the same crowd. You file that away with the other sentences deep where the doctrine goes. The bill passes before the month is out, riots and all. The soldiers go back to their barracks. The glaziers of the West End have the best spring of their lives. Bread does not get cheaper. Lady Verney does not say I told you. Among the many economies of her conversation, that is the handsomest. And then, on the second Friday of March, her carriage stops at the door, and it is the wrong day. In 20 years, you have it from Kitty, who had it from the whole history of the house. Lady Verney has never called at Marchwood House on any day but Tuesday. It is a Friday morning. You're on the stairs with the coal when the knocker goes, and something about the sound of it, too early, too hard, brings Mrs. Bell out of her still room, and then the door is open, and Lady Verney is coming up the stairs at a pace her knee has not permitted in years, past Thomas unannounced, which has also never happened, and into the morning room, and you're sent up at once with the Madeira, and this once she does not sit. He is out, she says. Her ladyship at her writing table goes very still. Bonaparte, out of Elba. He took ship the end of last month with his guard. The guard they left him, my dear, the 1,000 men, as I said at this very fireside on the peace night itself. And he landed in the south of France on the 1st of March, and he is marching on Paris. And the soldiers the king sends to stop him are putting their hats on their bayonet points and cheering him as he comes. The news is in the city this morning. The funds are falling like a shot bird. The room is so quiet you can hear the Madeira tremble against the glasses on your tray, and you make it stop. 12 miles of water, says Lady Verney. A title, a pension, 1,000 men, and 12 miles of water. I stood in this house last April and asked God to let me be an old fool. She sits down at last, all at once, the way the old sit when the body overrules them. He declined. Her hand goes to the vinaigrette at her wrist. You watch it go, and stops, and does not open it. In a year of Tuesdays you have never once seen that little box stay shut against news. Some things you understand now are past punctuation. Her ladyship rises, crosses the room, and does the only thing you have ever seen her do in the face of any catastrophe whatever. She takes the ribbon from her pocket and unlocks the tea caddy, and measures, and blends with her own hands, unhurried, as if the kettle were the one thing left in Europe still under orders. She puts a cup into her friend's hands and holds her own untasted, and the two of them sit with the fire between them. Two women who carried one whole war from its beginning to its end, and are now watching the next one arrive by the morning mail. 22 years we did this, Lady Verney says at last to the fire. I am too old to do it again. A pause. And I shall do it again. You stand at the wall with your tray, 17 years old, and you do not yet know. Nobody in this room knows. Nobody in this city, not the ministers, not the Emperor of the French himself, that the whole of it will be decided in a single June afternoon, in the rain-soaked mud of a shallow valley in the Low Countries, near a village with a name that nobody in this drawing-room has ever heard spoken. Waterloo. That is the summer's news. It will keep. Tonight, and for 100 nights first, there is only this, the tea and the fire, and two women deciding without one word said about it to carry what comes. And here is the strangest thing, the thing you will remember when the histories are written. The world does not stop. The funds fall and steady and fall. The regiments begin to move through the streets toward the Kent roads, and the season opens anyway. The cards arrive on the hall table. The milliners' boxes come and go. St. George's rings for other people's weddings. The house wakes at 6. The grates are blacked. The caddy is locked. The Tuesdays are Tuesdays again. War is coming back, and London does what London has always done with the unbearable. It keeps the accounts and dresses for dinner. 6 o'clock comes all the same. It always comes all the same. You are beginning to understand that this, precisely this, is what the phrase is for. On quiet evenings now, and late March, between the news and the season is full of them. You sometimes sit for a few minutes by the window of the back room after the shop of the day is shut, so to speak, when the fires are smoored and the shutters barred and the house above you is ticking itself cool, and you watch Curzon Street go dark, and you count the year the way Mrs. Bell counts lustres, twice, to make sure. Susan is asleep overhead already. She sleeps like a dropped stone, being 14 and worked like a pony, and her breathing on Kitty's old side of the bed has become just the furniture of the night. She has stopped crying at the basin. Last week you caught her telling the scullery maid which tradesmen weigh their thumbs, word for word in your voice, which was word for word in Kitty's, which was, you understand now, word for word in the voice of some girl of the last century whose name nobody will ever know. It gets easier. Somebody has to be the one who says it. This year, in this house, that somebody is you. Kitty comes on her Sundays out, 16 guineas worth of lady's maid from her shoes to her bonnet, and drinks tea in Mrs. Bell's own room, which is an honour the two of you do not name, and reports Bedford Row like a foreign correspondent. The best of her intelligence is this. In Bedford Row, the novels stand on the shelf with their own names showing on their spines. No false cough, no sermons. Mr. Rowan, says Kitty, reads them too, aloud. evenings, and does the voices badly on purpose. That is what choosing with your eyes open buys a woman in the year 1815, covers that tell the truth. Lady Verney is at the tea table every Tuesday, old and unretired, following the regiments now instead of the mortgages, her letters gone from Vienna to Brussels with the Times. Thomas has a cousin gone for a soldier and says nothing about it, and his nothing has a temperature, and the whole house reads it and is gentle with him in the invisible ways of below stairs, the best cut kept back, the heavy end lifted first. Mrs. Bell is one linen inventory nearer the cottage and Dis, and the hens, and her ladyship keeps the red book, and the caddy key sleeps in her pocket, and the men sign and the women reckon, and the door goes on closing every evening after dinner, and behind it the real business of the world goes on being done in lowered voices over 12-shilling tea. At the very beginning of this story, in the frozen dark of a February morning, I told you to keep one thought, that in a whole year not one guest would ever see you working in that drawing room. It has come true. They never did. The room was perfect every single day, and every single day you were invisible, and you know now that those were never two facts. They were always one fact. The house works because you are unseen, and because you are unseen you have seen everything. That is the bargain. The whole bargain of the wall and the tray and the white apron. And you stood on a rooftop in September while the one person in that house who has lived the bargain longest told you the only thing that matters about it. Mind you're the one who chose it. And what the men left the room and never saw, you saw. Count it the way she counts the lustres. A needle case that turned out to be a livelihood and a standing and somewhere to stand. A locked rosewood box that turned out to be a throne, 12 shillings the pound. A little gold-grilled toy of scandal that turned out, on the worst night of the summer, to be the coolest head in a crowd of 250,000. A red Morocco book that turned out to be where the truth of a great house actually lives, ruled in ink in a woman's hand, and a set of false sermons that turned out to be a mind, keeping itself alive behind a plain cover until it could stand on a shelf in its own name. 5 small objects 1 year, a whole education, and not one lecture in it, because nobody teaches furniture, and that is exactly why furniture learns everything. The candle is guttering. Go up now. Up the back stairs, the corkscrew of bare treads you have climbed and descended. You did the sum once, on your knees, in June. Something like 11,000 times this year. Past the 4th stair from the landing, which you step over without thinking, the way you do everything now, the knowing sunk down out of your head and into your feet, into the attic room, the sloped ceiling, the one chair, the basin with no ice on it tonight, because spring is coming up the island like a slow tide, whatever the Emperor of the French is doing about it. Undress in the dark by feel, wool stockings darned at both heels, darned finely, it must be said, by somebody who sews. Check the mattress, left side, the needle case rolled in red flannel, 7 good steel needles and the wren, the book in its false calf, sermons to young women, which have improved on every reading, both there, both yours, the miser's minute faithfully kept, lie down, the straw rustles and settles and takes your shape. It knows your shape by now. Susan breathes slow and even on the other side of the bed. 3 streets away St. George's strikes 11. Unhurried, the way it has struck over this parish for 90 years, for weddings and mournings and news of every colour, and will go on striking long after every name in this story is worn off its stone. The girl who came up from Aldbury on the carrier's cart is still in you. 1 deal box, 1 spare shift, 16 years old, and certain the city would swallow her. It did swallow her. That is what you know now that she didn't. Being swallowed by London is not the end of you. It is how the city takes things in. She's still there, that girl, asking her frightened questions somewhere far down in the dark. But she's not in charge anymore. The one in charge is the one who knows which way sideways is. Your hands ache tonight, the honest ache, the day's work leaving the muscles the way heat leaves a grate. Your feet are two dull, warm stones. The cracks at your fingertips are healing with the season. Let them all be. They have carried you through a year and a half of this city, the frost and the fires and the crowds and the stares, and they have earned their rest, and so have you. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a bed and a book and 7 good needles, £10 a year and a good character, and in this city of 500,000 strangers there are people. You can name them. You count them instead of sheep, who would cross a street for you, and one who would cross London. That is more than most of this city can say tonight. That is more than you could say a year ago. That's enough. It's enough. Tomorrow there will be the 6 o'clock bell. Tomorrow there will be the grate and the black lead and the smell of graphite and grease that means morning. Tomorrow there will be scuttles and stairs, trays and Tuesdays, the caddy to dust and the wall to stand at, and the door will close after dinner and the real talk will begin, and you will hear everything and be seen by no one. But that's tomorrow. Tomorrow can wait on the other side of the dark where it belongs. Right now there is only the bed warming and the breathing beside you, and the city outside going quiet street by street, watchman by watchman, like candles being pinched out one by one down a very long table, the same as last night, the same as February and the February before it, frost fairs and all, the same as all the nights stretching out ahead of you, down the years, wherever they are taking you. A housekeeper's keys maybe, a cottage of your own maybe, hens maybe, sleep now, the reckoning of all that belongs to other evenings. Centuries will pass. The London you know will change beyond recognition. The link boys and the watchmen will give way to gas, and the gas to a light nobody in your century could dream, and the streets will fill with carriages that need no horses. The old bridge whose piers froze the Thames will come down, and the river will never stand still again. Marchwood House, or houses just like it, will open their doors for shillings, and crowds will file through the drawing-room on Tuesday afternoons and admire the silk and never once look at the grate. The tea that sleeps tonight in locked rosewood at 12 shillings, the pound will come loose in paper packets, cheap as breath, drunk by everyone, guarded by no one. And the law that calls a married woman covered, that lets her sign nothing and own nothing and reckon everything, that law will be argued down, clause by clause, by the granddaughters of women who learned their arithmetic at tea tables behind closed doors, and it will die, and hardly anyone will remember it lived. But people will not change, not in the way that matters. People will still gather in one room when the meal is over, still wait for a door to click shut before they say the true thing, still keep the real accounts of their lives in some book, some drawer, some corner nobody else is shown, still hand the survival of every house down the way it has always been handed, the ones who know teaching the ones who don't, while somebody upstairs believes it all happens by magic. Some things don't change. The hour after dinner doesn't change. You have sat in that hour yourself. You know you have. The kitchen after the guests are gone, the voices dropping half an octave, the one conversation that only starts when a certain someone has left the room. The lowered voice is older than the drawing-room, older than the tea, older than every house that ever held it. Somewhere tonight, 200 years downstream from Anne Hartley, it is still going on, and somebody young is standing quietly by the wall of it, hearing everything, learning how the world is actually run. Let them stand. Let the talk murmur on without you now, behind its closed door, the way it always has and always will. Let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Anne Hartley in her attic room on Curzon Street 200 years ago, under every piece of wool she owned, with her treasures checked and her day complete. Let the world fade. The bells, the bill, the news from France, none of it needs you before morning. Let the noise quiet, street by street, watchman by watchman. Let your hands uncurl. They have done enough. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The fires are smoored, the plate is counted, the doors are barred, the house is safe and you are in it, and 6 o'clock is hours and hours away. You've earned this rest. All year you've earned it. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.